Hello, I'm Stephanie Solomon, Assistant Director of Mother Hubbard's Cupboard Food Pantry. I'm here today to of putting food by, trying to offer you as much information and some tidbits about some ways to preserve your harvest. And I'm here with Sue, if you want to introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Sue Berg with the Monroe County Extension Service here in Bloomington. And I'm the Consumer and Family Science Educator, which means that I answer questions about home and family. And we're here to share information that will allow you to have safe food as well as having quality food for the work that you put into it, both in the garden as well as in the kitchen. So what are we going to talk about now, Stephanie?
We're going to talk about dehydration or drying of food. It's one of those kind of exciting ways of preserving your food. And we eat dried food. It's, kind of fancy, usually not something we think of creating at home, dried fruit, sun-dried tomatoes and things like that. And actually it can be a pretty simple process, and it's a way to really take our harvest from the garden and or from the farmer's market or the grocery store and preserve it for further use.
Okay, and I think probably dehydrated food comes a lot with people who backpack and do a lot of camping, that they insist on it because water's heavy.
Right.
As we've learned today, is carrying water around here at the library. So, my interest in it is because we do backpacking, and so we try to eliminate the weight of food as quickly as we can.
I just want to have sun-dried tomatoes all through the season for putting on pizza and pasta. But we'll start out with some tips for dehydrating berries and different kinds of fruits. You always want to check the skins before you put them in the dehydrator and make sure that, they're dipped in the boiling water, kind of like when you blanch them, and make sure that there's no, molds or bacteria that's on the fruit before you put it in the dehydrator. With berries, we often start with the dehydrator. We have our nice dehydrator that's multi-tiered here. And there's all different kinds of foods have more or less water in them, and the amount of water really, determines the kind of drying that we do. And so for things like fruits, it really makes sense to use the dehydrator, whereas with herbs, you might just hang them upside down or put them on a screen somewhere. So we'll start with some ideas for the dehydrator. So I started talking about when you check the fruit, you dip it in boiling water for 30 seconds or more till the little skins split. That's similar to when we do tomatoes, and we know that it's time to peel the skins off because the skins have started to split. This allows also the moisture to escape. So if you have the skin split a little bit, that means that when you're dehydrating, all that moisture is going to be able to get out.
That would make sense. Yeah.
So it's not stuck there in the fruit and
go kaboom when it gets really big.
Right. And sometimes it's hard to tell whether or not you've dried something fully. And so a great resource is the Extension Office. There are publications you can get online or by stopping by the office to figure out if you're drying your foods in a food safe way. So if you have any questions, as in any kind of food preservation, about whether you're doing the process in the safest way possible, it's always great to check the handouts from the Extension Office. Some really exciting dried food that we really like is fruit leathers, which often have a lot of preservatives and added sugar and things when we buy them at the store, but they're a really healthy, great snack to have around. And you really have to know different fruits will have different amounts of sugar in them. And so the amount of sugar in the fruit will determine how quickly the leather will dry out. So if you have, for example, applesauce that you're turning into a leather, that one might dry at a different rate than your blueberry leather.
Yeah. Right.
And so for something like this, you obviously couldn't just put your leather right out, along the bottom where the moisture could drip down. You would want to form it. And so often the dehydrators will have a little mat that you can put the fruit leather on. I think you've used one of those before?
Yeah, I have. I've used the mat, and one of the first times I did fruit leather, I'm thinking, okay, fruit leather needs to be thin, so I made a thin coating of applesauce and realized that I'm forgetting that there's water in it.
Right.
So when I got done, I couldn't peel it off the sheet because it was so micro thin. It was like saran wrap, and so I messed up. But luckily, it was only half a pint of applesauce, so it wasn't like I lost everything. And we just sort of scraped it and then ate it in bits and pieces, but we couldn't roll it. But it makes it really nice, but you do have to put quite a thick, like anywhere from probably 3/8 to a half an inch of pureed fruit in order to make the thin leather that you can get to roll up.
Yeah.
And I know my mother does a lot of drying because she has lots of apple trees. And so
dried apples, good.
And her treat to the family is dried apples. And so she spends a lot of time drying apples in the fall, and it's really nice to walk into the house because it smells like apple pie all the time.
Oh, that's great.
But the drying does take time, and like you said, you need to know the water content of it. And sometimes it will look like it's dry, and it may not be fully dry enough to just put in a plastic bag and put in the cupboard.
Right.
And so one of the things that's usually recommended is that you take that dried food and put it in a canister or a container where you're watching it.
Yeah, and you want to watch for the condensation.
For condensation on it, or